Awesome. And then moderators, it's your guys' turn now to lead the discussion. If you want to start with the introduction question, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. Actually, is this kind of the part where I think we'll just have everybody kind of introduce themselves a bit, if they want. Let me see. Are we getting directly into the questions, or do you want us to? Okay, so the actual questions. Okay. I guess we can start with the first one is, how does COVID-19 affect a person's mental health? For example, a person's social life, work, or leisure, or relationships.
And actually, I'm sorry, can we introduce the panelists first before we jump into the questions? So I'd like to introduce Mary, Gail, and Richard. If you all don't mind just introducing yourselves and tell us a little bit about your background so that the students that are here know where you're coming from. I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Camelia.
I will go ahead and get started. My name is Mary Heffler, and I'm an LCSW, and I work for the Office of Behavioral Health, which is underneath the umbrella of the Department of Human Services, and I oversee the statewide crisis response program called Colorado Crisis Services, and some of you may be familiar with the 24/7 hotline. There's also a support line, and then a campaign that was created and now directed at youth. It's called Below the Surface, and I shared a toolkit, and we can look at those images later, but that's a little bit about where I come from. And I guess just to say this, that what we've seen since COVID is just really an uptick in calls to the crisis line. And as school started, we've seen an uptick in text, people reaching out for texting. And I can talk a little bit later about why people call and text, but that's who I am. So thank you for having me.
Okay, I'll go next. This is Dr. Gail Bruce Sanford, and I am the Executive Director and Staff Psychologist at MSU Denver Counseling Center. And I have had quite a long career in student mental health in particular. I have worked at other universities before, the University of Montana, Penn State University, and State College, George Mason University, Howard University. I've also worked in community mental health as well, and private practice experience too. So I bring over 3 decades of experience to mental health, student and adult as well, and it's something that I enjoy doing a lot. So I am happy to be here with everyone today.
And my name is Richard Michio. I'm also an LCSW. I'm a clinician here at the Health Center at Auraria and the Assistant Director of Educational Services, Inclusion, and Marketing. My background is primarily in community-based mental health. I started working with children and families, eventually worked into crisis intervention. The agency I worked with prior to being here at the Health Center at Auraria fell under the Colorado Crisis Services umbrella, and I was doing 24-hour in-person crisis intervention for 3.5 years. And I've been here at the Health Center for about 2 years now. So it's been a great opportunity to be able to work with young adults and work in this climate or in this environment. So I appreciate the invite and the opportunity to be able to chat with you all.
Great, thank you all for being here. We really appreciate the time that we're able to take from you with this important subject. I just wanted to go over a couple of logistics for those of you that are joining us. In the chat, there is a sign-in link if you don't mind filling that out. That's so that we can track attendance for students. This will count as a double ticket event, so please fill that out. And then I think we can get started. Thank you so much.
Okay, so question 1 will be, how does COVID-19 impact or affect a person's mental health? For example, a person's social life, work, leisure, and relationships.
Mary, you want to go first?
I mean, what I shared with Becca is that I can talk very specifically about crisis services and what's really available.
Okay.
And even though I'm a clinician, that is not the role that I'm here with today. But
Got it.
so I just have to be mindful. I have a private practice, but that's a whole different animal, right?
Okay.
But what I will say is that I think what we've been seeing in crisis services, the isolation has prompted increased anxiety. It's almost like communal grief, right? There's so much loss that people are experiencing, even just the inability to be on campus and sit with students, that lack of connection. And what we see is this sort of, our faces here, but we lose so much. And so as we've seen an uptick, certainly people reaching out, the hotline is really trying to navigate connection. And that is certainly, again, when we look at loss and grief and what we're seeing people reaching out about. I can say that September looks like is on par to be the busiest month ever, really, with the crisis line. You know, and I think that when there's national events or, you know, somebody dies by suicide or overdose, we do see people reaching out more. And I guess I just want to say is that the crisis line isn't just for the kinds of crises where people feel like they're on fire. We want people to reach out before it feels like that. So there's not really a definition of why someone would reach out. I think we've seen more people reaching out sort of loneliness and even for information. That is one of the top reasons, at least this month so far, is people are reaching out just to find out what is there for me, what kind of services or therapy or group. Or we also have a link for people that want to get off substances. The state of Colorado has some huge federal dollars to really look at opiate use disorder and kind of how it's impacted people in the state of Colorado. So there's a lot of different reasons that people reach out to the crisis line or show up at a walk-in center. And certainly we've seen the uptick. So that's all I sort of want to say about that. So I don't know if Gail or Richard, you want to kind of respond more specifically about clinical presentation.
Mm-hmm. Okay, sure. You go first, Rich.
I think some of the things that I've noticed, and a lot of the conversations I've had since the very beginning, are around just the disruption in structure and routine, and what impact that's had on just overall well-being and how they operate throughout their day, how students operate throughout their day. A lot of students rely on campus for a lot of things, not only for structure and going to class, but this is their social engagement. This is where their social networks are. A lot of students have mentioned this campus as being their safety net. This is a place that they rely on more than anything else throughout their day. They know it's a secure and safe and constant place to come and be able to take care of their day-to-day, you know, whether it's homework or just studying or being somewhere safe and comfortable. And so a lot of the conversations are around, how do I, you know, get that structure? And that lack of structure and the change in routine has really amped up this students' worry and discomfort. And I agree with Mary in that those conversations tend to head in the direction of this broad definition of grief and just losing those things and what that feels like, and that really being kind of a novel experience for a lot of students, and just not knowing what it is or how to identify it or how to name it. And so I would say those are a couple of things that I've noticed in the past couple of months.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And I will add, I agree with what you've both said, Mary and Richard. And this COVID-19 it's a major health crisis that's impacting us globally. So it's really huge. I mean, we're looking at 31 million confirmed cases across the world and about 1 million deaths so far. In the US, we're looking at 6.8 million confirmed cases and another close to 200,000 deaths. So, and the numbers are on the rise. So it continues to be of grave concern to everyone, of course. I looked at the Kaiser Family Foundation, who did a tracking poll in July of this year, looking at the impact of coronavirus on people. And they found that at least 53% of adults reported a negative impact on their mental health, which is a high percentage. And that's up from 32% in March when they did a similar study. So remember in March, that's when we were just getting notification, yes, we do have a pandemic. So we were at 32% being impacted then. And then now later in July, we're looking at an uptick as much as 53% being impacted in your mental health, of course. They also looked at sleep difficulties, and at least 36% are reporting increases in sleep problems. Eating problems, another 32% are reporting increases in eating problems as well. There are increases in alcohol consumption as means of coping, which we do not really advocate, of course, but 12% increase in alcohol consumption. And then for those who've already had chronic lifelong conditions, we are seeing a worsening of their chronic conditions, and that's up to by 12% due to the worry and stress about either their physical and or their mental health as well. We're also noticing a lot of economic hardships due to, well, a lot of people losing their jobs, being unemployed or underemployed. And with the social distancing that's required for health and safety, we're also seeing an increase in loneliness and isolation for some, especially those for whom, prior to the pandemic, they did not have a plan or a great social buffer. They relied on their job or they relied on school only or mostly. So for those, the conditions are exacerbated as well. So it's important that we stay connected, let's put it that way. The Census Bureau also did a household pulse survey. They looked at adults ages 65 and up, and they were negatively impacted, mentally speaking, as well as women with children under age 18. They were significantly impacted, more so than their male counterparts. So mothers with younger children, they're at higher risk, more stressed, definitely. And if you look at it from the perspective of they have to entertain these children, they have to school these children or help school these children, do their own work, do their household chores. So they have multiple tasks that they are attending to. And it's very challenging for them, of course. And then this pandemic has also shed light on a lot of the disparities amongst us. So we are looking at racial and ethnic disparities. We're also looking at disparities in access to healthcare and mental health care too. And especially for those who have lost their jobs and lost their benefits, it's more difficult. So we are thankful for places like Colorado Crisis Centers who will provide some support at no charge to anyone in need. And that's a great service that you do provide. I just want to underscore that for sure. And then the US Department of Health and Human Services, they do a weekly morbidity and mortality report. And about a year ago or so, we had about 1 in 10 being impacted by mental health issues. Forward the clock to a year present now, current time, we are looking at 1 in 3 being impacted by mental health issues. So that's a significant increase. And their weekly average for the month of May was about 34.5%. In June, it went up to 36.5%. And in July, 40.1%. So there's a steady incline there that we can observe. So it's very important that we continue to provide support to all of our friends and significant others and colleagues, family members, etc. Every little bit that we can do, it goes a long way. Okay, I'll stop there.
I guess I can move on to the next question. Are there any tools or tips one could use to maintain a good balance concerning one's mental health during the pandemic?
So one of the things that I talk with clients about, and certainly I run some parent groups, is really trying to keep it simple and focus on things like gratitude. And I know that's an interesting word in a time of terrible insecurity and anxiety. And so when we look at sort of this collective grief or communal grief, we don't even recognize that as grief. And we don't really have rituals and routines if we don't really know what to do with it, right? We think of grief as when somebody dies or I lose a job, but this sense of loss of just routine and connection has been significant. So I am a huge proponent of find the people in your life that you feel safe with, and you don't have to wear that mask of like, hi, I'm fine, and be real with them, right? Get people in your life that can have empathy for you or even sit with you. And there is lots of studies to support writing down 3 things you're grateful for every day. And it can be as simple as a really good night's sleep, or I have a giant golden retriever that just loves on me every day. I feel so much gratitude for Ruben, right? It's really the simple things, along with mindfulness and using breath as grounding, because I feel like the COVID pandemic has really brought this sort of level of angst that we don't even know what it is, right? We're not sleeping well, we're drinking too much, or we're not eating well, and we're carrying around this sort of elevated sense of insecurity, and we can't control it, right? We don't know when it's going to end. What is our new normal like? Is this it for a while? Probably. Even if there's a vaccine, are we all going to run out and get it? I won't be. I'm not going to be the first one there, right? So the idea is, how do we adjust to these challenges? So I do think if we don't have those natural supports, certainly reaching out, to the Student Health Center, or even calling or texting and just saying, I'm struggling, right? Having a platform where you feel held and there's a container for you. And I'm a huge pusher of the mindfulness and of using the breath as tools of grounding, but that's sort of my pitch for that. So thank you, Richard.
I think to tack on to that, I'm in agreement. I've had countless conversations with individuals around just checking in with oneself, throughout the day, and how powerful that can really be. We find ourselves going throughout the day, whether it's school, work, the combination of both, family, and we find ourselves, sitting there at the end of the day and realizing, my shoulders have been up here all day. Let me check in with myself, take a breath, do a little body scan, and say, oh, I haven't felt that, I haven't felt my shoulders drop in, 12 hours. But I think an extension of what Mary was saying is intentionality, and really being intentional about what it is that you do, and putting some of these practices into your daily routine. I've chatted with students about, it may seem kind of weird to actually schedule me time or schedule an exercise for yourself, whether it's a breathing practice or whether it's a mindfulness practice, a 5 senses mindfulness practice as you're walking from point A to point B, or going from work to school, or your car to your house. Just really checking in with yourself and your surroundings, and bringing yourself into the present moment, and really extending that to the gratitude piece, being grateful for those things and being grateful for actually being able to do it. But I think to a point that Mary was saying, that loss of control is hard to deal with. There's a lot of things right now that are out of our control. And I think this practice of being intentional about these self-care strategies can be really powerful in reminding us that there are a lot of things that we can do to keep ourselves in a good place, or to balance, what it is that's going on around us. And it reminds us that there are things that we do day in and day out, that we may dismiss, a walk with the dog, a roll around on the floor with your cat, stepping outside just to get a breath of fresh air. Those are things that maybe sometimes we dismiss as being really just minimal, and not really significant, but they're really powerful in us being able to get through our day-to-day activities. And if we're able to remember that and, use that intentionality to say, I'm going to step outside for 10, 15 minutes today. I'm going to set an alarm on my phone to have a mindfulness check-in, 3 times a day, 20, 30 seconds maybe. Those are things that really we build into our habits. They become healthy habits for us. And they actually motivate, they motivate us to continue to do those things. We find benefits from them. We're able to take our first deep breath. We're able to be, present in nature. We're able to emotionally separate from maybe the overwhelm of school in our environment, just to reset a little bit. And so those little practices can help to motivate us to continue those practices, or maybe even add on to those practices throughout our day.
Very good. And I will just add, it's important to get enough sleep on a daily basis. That's important because the brain needs to feel a sense of restoration to face the activities of the following day, all of the challenges and assignments, etc., that we have to undertake. Additionally, eating healthfully is important. So all of your different food groups, whether you're vegan or vegetarian or not, meat eating, it's important to have the right amount of proteins, the right food groups. It is very important for our functioning as well. We want to avoid tobacco, alcohol, and illicit drugs. That's really important that we stay clean. Let's put it that way. I know it's probably not very realistic for a lot of people who have come to rely on these substances, but they hurt us more so than help us. Let's put it that way. And then we want to be able to limit our screen time for several students that I have been talking with, and colleagues as well. They're at work for 8 or 9 hours a day on the screen, video meetings, video encounters. In addition to some are taking classes either part-time or full-time, they're on the screen again. And then there's time at the end of the day for assignments or extra readings that have been assigned in Canvas or what have you. So there's a lot of screen time, maybe 12 to 15 hours a day for some people. That's a lot. It is important to try to avoid this computer vision syndrome, where there's a feeling of uneasiness, lightheadedness, nausea sometimes. So taking frequent breaks is important from the screen. There's a 20-20 rule that says every 20 minutes, you stare away from the computer screen 20 feet away at something in the distance, 20 feet away, for 20 seconds. So every 20 minutes, you stare at something 20 feet away for 20 seconds to help mitigate the impact of the extreme screen time that we are using all of the time. Then it's important that we relax and recharge, whatever, relaxation means to us. It means different things for different people. For some, it's watching a movie or hanging out virtually. I would say virtually when I say these things now. Hanging out virtually with a friend, connecting. So this is a time that we are asked to, socially distance ourselves for health and safety reasons, yes, but we don't want to be socially disconnected. So there are very many different ways in which we could virtually connect, okay? Some people have told me about Netflix movie parties, where you watch a movie together in the confines of your own home. You're watching it together. You're not in the same room, but it's a Netflix party where you could chat and discuss what the movie is all about, et cetera, et cetera. There are quarantine chats that one could build in as well with your little support groups. There's FaceTime on your phone. There are many apps like WhatsApp and Viber, many other apps for socially connecting where you reach out. It's important to do something for somebody else at this point in time. Have less focus on self. Self-care is important, but I think, as Mary was saying, gratitude too is also important. So looking at ways in which we could reach out and brighten somebody else's day and express contentment for whatever good we have in our lives as well. I think that's very, very important. Yes.
Thank you for that. It looks like there is an audience member who had a question. Rebecca, looks like she's asking, what are some strategies for advocating ourselves and our mental health at work, school, or with our families? Do you have any?
So advocating for our own mental health with significant others? Is that it? Was that what you're asking?
It's down in the comments section as well, or in the chat section.
What are some strategies for advocating to ourselves?
Someone wanted to comment on that.
I would say it's important to have healthy boundaries with everybody. That's an extreme form of self-care where you say, I can do this much for you today, or maybe not today. Tomorrow might be a better day for me. So I think having healthy boundaries with others is very important. And if there's a need to get extra mental health support, to be able to share that with significant others, if somebody else has to pay for your treatment, to include them in the conversation. At our school, as you know, on campus, our services are free for students. Mental health treatment services are free, covered by your tuition and fees already, let's put it that way. And so cost should not be a factor there. But for anybody else who's not a student, who may be on the outside, we do have free services in the community as well. We start with Colorado Crisis Centers, who can talk with you and engage you and give appropriate referrals too. But I think, letting others know what your limit is, that's very, very important. I have so many exams today. I'm not able to participate in this activity today, but I can join you over the weekend. So it's a way of saying, yes, but, as opposed to a plain, no, I cannot. Yes, I'm willing to help with this, but not at this time. How about at a different time that works for me? That's how I will respond to that question.
Okay, so question 3 is, how do issues like anxiety and depression both interfere with schoolwork and inform and motivate schoolwork? All research tends to be personal, so how can we help students to build a bridge between their lived experiences and their academic line of inquiry?
Richard, I'm going to turn this over to you and Gail for, it sounds like, for specific clinical strategies. And if I have something to say, I will. So.
Sure. Okay, I'll go first, that's fine. And I will mention here that anxiety and depression could interfere with our ability to focus, our attentional skills that are so critical for doing well in class, for keeping up with the readings or assignments, etc., or exams and what have you. And if this is disrupted, if our regular routine is disrupted, it means that we become less organized, we are less structured, there's less follow-up, we fall behind, we procrastinate, and that's not good. And especially if we procrastinate after 2 or 3 weeks, before you know it, it's midterms and we are way behind. So it's important to get a handle on it early. From the minute one realizes, oh, I'm falling behind after the first or second week, it's important to step in and get some help. And when I say get some help, check in with counseling centers on campus. That's a great big first start, where therapists can help with helping you to get back on track, helping you to process the issues that are bugging you, let's put it that way, that are getting in the way of your sleep or focus or what have you. If we don't do this, we continue to miss deadlines, etc. And before you know it, the semester is up and we are not in a good place. And that's not what we want. We want everybody to succeed. So I know that anxiety and depression also impacts the social relationships that we have come to rely on campus in particular. Now that we aren't, face to face, it's very difficult sometimes to establish the same degree or quality of relationships with others through this medium that we are using right now. It feels like something is missing. And sometimes people may miss live lectures and interactions with professors as well. So that could even make their depression and anxiety a little bit worse, as a matter of fact. So some people have come to rely on school as the mechanism for helping them to socialize and to connect in very many different ways with professors, with friends, colleagues, peers in their classrooms, etc. And it's very hard to deal with uncertainty, especially when you're depressed and anxious, because for a lot of people, we come to rely on due deadlines, specific dates, when something is going to be over. And with this pandemic, we don't quite know when it's going to be over. It could be 6 months, it could be 5, it could be a year, we don't quite know. So dealing with the unknown also feeds our uncertainty, it feeds our anxiety and our distress overall, is what I would say. So that's the first part of the question. And in terms of how does it inform and motivate us, Well, we have to look at ways of being flexible. We may have been used to doing one thing in one particular mode for several years, and now is the time for us to say, what can we do differently? What are we willing to change? What are we willing to give up? What are we willing to embrace as something that's new and different to help us through these tough and challenging times? So once we put ourselves in that mode of being adaptable and flexible, we tend to do better overall. Being open to new and different ideas is what I would say. We also have to keep our academic goals in mind. So whether we are signed up for part-time courses or full-time, whether it's 6 credits or 12 or 15, it's important to keep our goal and to be structured each day about how much we do to accomplish those goals. So I always say, keep a lovely calendar, color-coded for each course, what's due when, quizzes, exams, papers, etc. Those could be very helpful in keeping us focused and motivated to reach those goals, and try 1 week at a time, 1 week at a time. We're almost at midterms, we're almost halfway there. We'll do it, we can do it together. And there's help on campus, remember that too. You don't have to worry alone. Let us, Help Center, counseling centers, involve us in your journey through this pandemic. Yes.
I don't want to double up on anything that you said. I mean, there's a lot of really good information around, what stress does to us in the classroom setting and personal relationships. I wanted to kind of look at that positive side of things. And Gail, you mentioned something, the organization piece around color coding your planner. I remember in grad school, my planner was a rainbow for, I had school, I had work, I had family, I had, appointments. That was how I made it through. But that's a side note. But when it comes to stress, there's this side of stress that I think people maybe dismiss as being really powerful. When we think about stress, we think of that negative side of things, which we label as distress. We're overwhelmed, we're tired, we're not sleeping well, we're distracted, maybe our social relationships are impacted. But on the other side of that, there's a positive side, which has been studied, and it's called eustress. So eustress being the positive side, the motivating side, the energizing side of stress. And it kind of falls on this bell curve where distress is kind of on this downside right after the peak where things are overwhelming and it's hard for us to manage everything that's going on, and it impacts day-to-day functioning, how we do academically, personally. But on the upswing of that is that eustress, and that's when we know we have assignments due, we know we have maybe deadlines or upcoming events that motivate us to get things done, that motivate us to prepare, that maybe get us excited to do things. And so being able to take advantage of that part of stress, being able to realize that there is this motivating factor that can keep us on task, that can keep us motivated to do these things that we're doing on a regular basis, or something new, like you were mentioning, Gail, and realizing that there are points where maybe it's impacting our ability to function, to our ability to focus, our ability to manage the multiple responsibilities that we have. And so we have to be mindful of that line, taking advantage of the motivation and energy that we get to do the things that we need to do and want to do, but realizing also, that it can get to a point where it is overwhelming and we're finding ourselves slipping a little bit when it comes to responsibilities, whether it's personally or employment or academically. And so I just wanted to mention that positive side of stress that we really can take advantage of and use on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So I guess we'll move to the next question. Are there specific study techniques for students suffering from anxiety, depression, or isolation?
Yeah, well, I will say never worry alone. I'll start off with that again. But I know some people don't like study groups, but this is a time for virtual study groups where you share experiences, share knowledge, get clarification from your peers. Or if you don't want a large study group, you can do a dyad, just you and one other person. So virtual study partners as well. I think that could be very helpful. being organized, I will emphasize that, a study plan for each class, taking study breaks. So, there are students who may say, well, I sat down from 6 in the evening until 11 at night trying to study my physics, what have you, and didn't take many breaks or anything. I'm saying you must take a break, at least a 10-minute break every hour. It's important for the brain, so that you get up from wherever you were sitting and studying, walk to another part of your house or apartment, look out the window, do something different, get a quick snack, make a quick phone call if you need to, but distract yourself and then come back to it again. So every hour, a 10-minute break is important. And in terms of another specific study technique, not waiting until the very night before the exam to cram everything down, all 10 chapters, pull an all-nighter, no sleep. That's not good at all. It's better to be prepared from the very beginning, doing a little bit each week. And of course, having your exams and quizzes scheduled so you know what's coming up, so that you feel a better sense of preparedness. One of the things that's really important in doing well is the repetition of the work that we do. So being able to read a chapter and then review, and then try to recall, and then reread if we need to. Repetition is important to help us get it into long-term memory. And once we get it into long-term memory, it's easier to retrieve it. It means that we are more familiar with the material now. So it's easier to retrieve it for an exam. We don't draw a blank, for instance. That's really, really important. And it also reduces your anxiety if you're adequately prepared for an exam. I think that physical exercise is also very important. So not just sitting and studying and reading all day long, but getting up and movement is also very, very important. So whether it's 15, 20 minutes a day outside on your back patio or backyard or whatever space you have, sometimes I advocate for going to and getting one of the hosts who do physical exercises to follow along with them, or even some things like meditation and yoga and Tai Chi, things that help to relax the mind. That could be very helpful as well. So you want to give the brain enough stimulation, but enough support at the same time for the many challenges of how much you have to, sort of be able to inculcate and reverberate at different times. That's very, very important. And then I think knowing what kind of a learner you are, that's very, very important. So some people are visual learners, some people are more hands-on tactical learners, some people are kinesthetic learners, they like movement, they like action, they want to get up and walk and read, for instance. They're not just sitting passively absorbing the material. So knowing what kind of a learner you are is important. Some people like to learn in social groups. So those would be the ones who would be forming these study groups. Whereas there are others who are more solitary learners. They want to sit by themselves and block everything and everybody else out. And that's okay too. So once you know the kind of learner that you are, then you could follow along with techniques that will support your learning style. That's very important. Yeah.
I think there's a lot to say around the physical activity piece. There's been a lot of research around, individuals who actually engage in physical activity prior to trying to learn something new, and how the brain retains more information after being physically active. And that's not saying you have to go run a marathon, or do anything that's maybe out of your comfort zone or that maybe you're not used to or haven't done before. But even being able to go out for a 20-minute walk, being able to do a short little workout, or as Gail was mentioning, maybe some of these either pre-recorded or live, exercise routines that are available not only through the university right now, but also through YouTube and other outlets, can be really powerful in being able to one, expel, some of that energy that you may have, bring your attention and focus, to what it is you're trying to learn and help you to retain information. I've spoken to the 2020 concept that Gail brought up, and really talking to students around, again, being intentional about setting reminders or setting break reminders for your study periods. There's a lot of apps out there that have mindfulness timers, or that you can just set an alarm on your phone 20, maybe 30 minutes into your study session, given how our brain operates and how much attention we can actually give at any given point. 20, 25 minutes is up, alarm goes off. That's your reminder to actually take a break. You know, a break may be maybe a YouTube video or a walk around your house or a step outside, you know, or rewarding yourself, you know, looking at these breaks as being a reward, and taking a positive or putting a positive reframe on taking a break. You know, I've spoken to a lot of people who kind of get down on themselves because they're taking a break. They feel like they should be doing more. They haven't done enough. They don't deserve a break at this point because it's only been 20, 25 minutes. But in reality, when you reframe that to, I've sat here for 20, 25 minutes and I've worked steadily on what it is I'm trying to do, I deserve a break. You know, putting a positive reframe on that situation can actually motivate you to come back to do more. And that break is only going to enhance that motivation to come back. So being intentional about those breaks, setting a timer or an alarm on your phone for increments of 20, 25 minutes for yourself, and doing that regularly throughout the period that you see yourself doing some work or doing some studying.
Okay, Raymond and Amanda, it looks like we do have a question in the chat from Courtney. I'm not sure if this was answered yet, but Courtney asks, what about specific techniques for classes that are condensed when you only have a very short period of time to study?
Yeah, well, yes, there's those short-term intense classes similar to a winterim, let's put it that way, or the May semesters, et cetera, short time and a lot of work to be covered. I think this is a time to look at your life and see what can you eliminate for that short period of time. What's not as important right now that you can defer to a later period so that you have more time to focus on the extra readings, the more intense assignments and engagement that it's needed at this point in time. So restructuring, reorganizing, that's what it calls for the most part. And having a plan where you do some every day in bigger chunks, as opposed to waiting till the end of the week to start studying. No, you must do some every day, regardless of your schedule. So make it happen that you can have some time each day on your schedule so that you never fall behind. And that's the best way to get through an intense class over a short period of time.
Okay, so question 5 is, how can faculty and staff empower students to get outside of their own frame of reference and get outside to help their peers?
I think that's a great question, and it really calls for a lot of empathy, being able to empathize with others, step outside of yourself and not think that you're the only one in the classroom. So to be able to think of, what about the person across the hall, across the room, across wherever you're seated, who may need some assistance? And I think faculty and staff may be able to assign some assignments in which they encourage work with another person or with a small group, and then to have them write a report on what was it like to have that assignment. How did Johnny learn in this experience with you? What were some of the challenges that Johnny had, or that Mary had, or that Harry had? And how did you try to help them? How could you try to step in their shoes to identify with where they're stuck? And to be able to come back and to write up an assignment like that, I think could be very helpful. And then the professor can also assign points for engaging in those assignments too. That would encourage a sort of altruistic behavior. We don't want to always reward altruism because it should come naturally and spontaneously and not expecting reward. But I think if we do the rewards at random intervals, they don't quite know when the reward is coming, that helps to reinforce the good behavior too. So I think that could be really helpful. You know, and let's say if we have a math class and you've got several people who are struggling, we could assign, you know, persons to work in pairs. We could do it randomly and, you know, have them set up meeting times and say, okay, what are you struggling with? And we talk with each other like that. And how could you help me? What do you think I'm missing? Having conversations like that and having faculty and staff, you know, give them some conversation starters too. How do you get this going with another student so that they don't feel too intimidated by the task from the very beginning? So I think that could be very helpful.
Mary, I wanted to give you an opportunity. I know you're not here on campus, but wanted to see maybe what input you had around this question.
Can't hear you.
Yeah, so as
Okay.
I unmute, I mean, I think that for students, Gail has said this repeatedly, is that you're not alone. And I think despite a bigger conversation about mental health and behavioral health care, one of the biggest issues is still shame and stigma, right? Especially when we're looking at sort of non-white cultures. A lot of, you know, I mean, I'm daughter of an immigrant. You couldn't have paid my father to go to therapy, right? Even when he needed it. So trying to sort of destigmatize getting help, or even wondering why do I feel this way, right? And so I think that the notion of that you're not alone, you have to keep that in mind. And especially in these days of more isolation and lack of connectedness, besides like the Zoom faces, we often feel sad. And so what I will also share is that it's not unusual to cry a little bit every day. Like for the last 2 weeks, for whatever reason, I cry every day. So we have to limit our media consumption. You know, what I say about social media is if it doesn't fill you with light and joy, get rid of it for a while. Because oftentimes it just creates anxiety, and especially in the nature of what's going on in the world, our election is soon. If social media is making you feel worse, don't do it. But I think, again, the notion of is that you don't have to tackle these things alone, whether it's trying to navigate, how do I study, how do I connect? I'm not doing well in this class, can I say anything? My experience has been is ask for flexibility. Let people know that you're not okay. But I know what we know sort of as providers and as practitioners is that the stigma is a huge reason that people don't reach out. What is my family gonna say? You know, is this really a problem when there's other people in a food line, right? This isn't so bad. And what I say is it's like the gratitude thing, right? Even though maybe I have to be grateful every day for my abundance, it doesn't mean that I'm not suffering. It doesn't mean that where I struggle is real. And so otherwise we just sweep it away like I'm not as bad as, but really to just know that we all manage uncertainty differently, right? We all have different supports. Some of our family will be really embracing when we're saying, hey, I'm struggling with anxiety, I'm not sleeping. Like I could never tell my father I went to therapy, right? Just not his world, not his scene, doesn't really understand it. So I think the idea is really that you don't have to suffer in silence. That would probably be my biggest thing that I know Gail and Richard have been talking about.
Yeah, I like that, Mary, and especially as you talk about social media consumption, to limit it or to cut it off completely if you need to. There are times that students have to just get rid of Instagram or get rid of Facebook, because there are times that there are social comparisons that make them feel inferior to others, and we don't want that. And there are times that people may misinterpret or distort facts and report them back on social media. So it's important to know what is helpful and what's not. If it's making you feel bad, then we shouldn't be doing it. Let's put it that way. I agree with you.
Okay, let's move, I guess we can move on to the next question. So question 6, what resources are available in our community to assist students, faculty, and staff who are struggling in their daily lives during this pandemic? And then also, what external sources do we have access to?
I mean, I can just sort of start out a little bit with crisis services. Again, for those of you that don't know, it was right before the Aurora shooting, right? The governor was already looking at what are we doing for the people of Colorado to connect them when they're in some sort of behavioral health crisis. And we try to be really careful to not define it, because first of all, the word crisis feels very inflammatory and big. But what we know is that the most common reasons people are reaching out is anxiety. And that is also a very big word that covers a lot of things, right? But we know that people are reaching out. The second reason is family and relationship issues, right? all of us are in some sort of relationships, and they're not always like the unicorn land, right? They can be stressful and not supportive. So the idea is, you know, I don't have to, again, be in this on fire crisis to reach out. And what we know from our young people, from youth, sort of 21 and under, is that they prefer to talk to a trusted person in their life, right? Maybe a trusted adult, a sibling, an aunt, maybe a parent, if that works, a friend. But if that doesn't exist, again, what we know about the text and hotline is that you don't even have to give your first name if you don't want to, right? We always collect information about who's calling and texting because we have to justify our existence to the legislature, right? And beg for money every year. So that's part of it. So you're gonna get asked a bunch of questions, but you don't have to answer them to get connected. We also know that in the COVID days, people are calling for information for themselves or someone else. Like maybe you're concerned about your partner or roommate, your sibling, you don't really know what to say or what to do. So oftentimes we have people calling just for information about resources and what's available in their community. I mean, I think the other piece too is they're not everywhere, but there are these walk-in centers. Many of them are open 24/7, not all of them. And we also have mobile response. So we know that Student Health Services is open daytime hours, but we also know that people aren't just in crisis between 9 and 5 or 8 and 4 or whatever. It happens frequently in the middle of the night. You can't sleep, you're spinning, you're in a rabbit hole of some type, like you just can't get out of it. So you can always call or text, but maybe you're close by to one of the walk-in centers. And as Becca said, I shared like our toolkit. You can go to coloradocrisisservices.org and look at where walk-in centers are. You can look at why people call and text. You can also look at Below the Surface, which is again is the youth campaign that was created and vetted by young people. And the messaging and the campaign looks really different. So that's what I would say sort of statewide is we do have this 24/7 hotline, the support line, which is operated by peer specialists, so people with lived experience. And what I want to just say about that is that we have finally realized the value of people that have been there, for lack of a better non-clinical explanation. We know that peer-to-peer interactions are very powerful. So all venues of crisis services have peer specialists, so people with lived experience that are part of providing care. So the support line is not available 24/7. It's just something to keep in mind. It's 7 a.m. to midnight. And you can bypass the outgoing messages and just hit star. It'll get you to somebody to get you to a peer. You can also leave a message. That's the only number that you can leave a message on. So maybe you don't want to talk to a clinical person. People are really fearful that you're going to send the police out, or you're going to maybe you have a history of being involuntarily hospitalized, and so there's that fear about that. Just also, I mean, do people call when they're feeling suicidal? Absolutely. And the other piece to know is that the crisis line rarely sends out law enforcement. We just want to kind of emphasize that the staff do a really good job at managing the crisis on the phone, and sending out law enforcement is less than like 2% a month of all the activities. So when you're talking about 750 contacts a day, that's not very much. So oftentimes people are worried that if they say, I've been thinking about killing myself, you know, as that crisis counselor on the phone navigates that with you, police is not the go-to. So that's really something that we want to emphasize too, is that if it does feel like a 911 thing and somebody says, I've taken a bottle of Tylenol or I pulled my gun out, we will send out law enforcement. And they also have the ability to dispatch mobile, which is not an urgent response. It could take up to an hour in urban, like in an urban environment, or up to 2 hours if you're more of a rural community or in a frontier area. So people talk about suicide and they're gonna, you know, and we just don't panic and send out EMS and the whole parade of bells and whistles. We know that's not always effective. So I think I went down some other rabbit hole, but I don't even know what the damn question was anymore. So it's like,
you were answering what are the resources, some of the resources to help.
Okay, very good.
Yes, people who are struggling. Yes, very nice job done, sure. Yeah, and I will add, there are very many different types of resources, and different people reach out for different things. Some people will reach out for mental health, and we like that, and we encourage that, and we want that. But not everybody wants mental health. But should, in case they want mental health, in addition to your Colorado Crisis Services, on our campuses, our Auraria campus, CCD has a counseling center, UC Denver has a counseling center, MSU Denver has a counseling center, the health center has psychiatric care workers, and Richard as well. So we've got lots of help on campus at no additional charge for students. It's good to know that. And then there's our walk-in centers, as Mary, I want to emphasize that we do often send students to the walk-in centers on a weekend. They're 24/7. That's very helpful too. But in the event that people choose not to come to a mental health professional right away, we don't want to coerce them or force them in any way. We encourage them. We highly recommend it. But in the event they figure, I want to try something different, there's some who say they're spiritual. Whatever spiritual means to them, they turn to their higher power to intervene in some cases where it might be appropriate. Okay, and we wouldn't judge them for that. It's inspirational for them to be in touch with their spiritual side, et cetera, or spiritual ministers or what have you they have in their community. And then there are some who prefer something more social. So we are looking at virtual book clubs, virtual game nights, virtual charitable undertakings. Facebook has a creative shop. For those of you who follow Facebook, they have a creative shop where they talk about the warning signs of suicide. How do you know if you have to be worried about a friend? How do you start a conversation about it? And that's really helpful too. And for those of you who are into pop music, etc., Billie Eilish, right? Some of you know about Billie Eilish and her wonderful music and the person that she is and her struggle with mental health. And she has come out openly to talk about it and to encourage others. And other celebrities have done that too. But she has on her website some things called GIFs, GIFs, that you probably are familiar with, which are the animated pictures without sound. They're little messages that you can send a friend or send somebody that you care about. I'm here for you. I haven't heard from you in a while. Want to talk? Is everything okay? Just little conversation starters like that to get a person talking. Are you really okay? You're not sounding like yourself. So things like that could encourage people to talk about what's distressing them. And then you could engage them deeper in a conversation about maybe we should try to get some more professional help then now. It seems like you're dealing with a lot and let's not have you worry alone. So that might be another avenue of getting people to connect as well. I know there's a stigma there, but I think over the years we have been able to decrease the stigma given the fact that people are breaking down our doors and asking for help. That tells us a lot of people are responding, and that's a good thing, and we want to encourage that as well.
And in addition, the services that are available on campus, people may consider that as kind of the traditional mental health services, whether it's a counseling center or the health center for psychiatric support. But we also serve as resources. If campus isn't a place where maybe you feel comfortable enough seeking services, or maybe you've been connected elsewhere in the community and you wanted to figure out what other resources were available, we're able to have those conversations over the phone. We can consult with you and see what it is that you're looking for and what you're hoping to get out of the services that you're looking for, and serve as advocates for you to get that support. In addition to the mental health or traditional mental health services on campus for those who are maybe struggling with substance use issues or who are in recovery and are concerned about the recovery, there's an Auraria recovery community on campus, and it's a tri-institutional group that's made up of students from all three schools. It's student-led, it's primarily student-operated and run. The support groups that they offer, it's students only. There's no intermingling of faculty or staff. They're putting together a bunch of social activities, either virtually and even some physically distanced here in the near future. So there's an opportunity to really engage with peers, as was mentioned, similar to the crisis line, those who can relate, those who have similar stories or experiences and are maybe within the same age and demographic group as you, to share and get support. And so I tried to post their flyer in the chat. I'm not sure if I provided that ahead of time, and I don't know if it came up, but I'm going to go ahead and put their information in here, their website. And on their website, it has their meeting times, kind of their mission statement, social activities that they're engaging in, that you can check out. And if you wanted to get involved in as a peer or somebody just really supporting the movement, awesome. If you're somebody in recovery or looking for that support, it's another great resource to have here on campus. Right now they're virtual as well, but know that there's a lot of resources for a lot of different issues that you or your peers may be struggling with.
That's very good, Richard. I'm glad you added that. That's a great service, especially now that they're virtual too. And I want to add one more, and that's our care centers on campus. Every university on our campus has a care team or care center team for the most part. We have both care team and care center, where you could file a care report if you're concerned about someone or concerned about yourself and want somebody to reach out to you. So that's another great avenue. And with our care center, they assist students with emergency grants and food insufficiencies and homelessness and the variety of struggles that students have. So it's a great resource, wonderful staff, very caring and supportive and understanding as well. It costs nothing to go to them. And they're also operating virtually right now too. Sure.
Okay, so our last question is, what are faculty, staff, and students willing to do differently during the pandemic, especially given the requirements for social distancing?
What can they do differently, you're saying?
Yeah.
Well, I think a lot will have to be virtual. Everything will be virtual. Virtual dyads and meeting groups. Assigning peers. Sometimes if you wait on students to do it on their own, they do not really reach out or they don't respond, some of them. So I think if faculty assign people in different groups, I think that could be very helpful and give them a particular time frame in which to get their activity completed and then give feedback to the entire class. That could be very helpful. Understanding, if faculty and staff could be more understanding of the fact that this is a pandemic that none of us have been through before. And from what we know about the 1917, 1918 flu pandemic, Spanish flu, they didn't have 1/4 of the resources that we have today. And think of electronically, the advances we have made from since then. They didn't have laptops and cell phones and Wi-Fi and to connect and apps, right? They had to figure it out by word of mouth or whatever newspaper they would have had. It came out maybe once a week or however often. They didn't have laptops where they could sit in the comfort of their home and work. They had classes outside on the lawn in the heart of winter in coats and hats and scarves and gloves. So we are fortunate for what we have today. So if faculty and staff could be more understanding and supportive, that yes, this is unprecedented. We've used this word 1,000,000 times for the year across the globe already. And it's really true, because there's no exact pattern for how to do it. We are figuring it out as we go along. We will make mistakes. We listen to the experts. That's the important thing. And the experts are telling us to be understanding, to be caring, to be more flexible, to be less judgmental, to be less rigid. And I think if faculty and staff could be like that, we'll make lots of headway with our students as well.
The question reads, what are faculty and staff willing to do differently? I think that's a tough one to answer, because I think different faculty, different staff will have different willingness to do things differently going forward. And that's the hard part. I do agree with Gail that I think there needs to be flexibility and grace, with how different things are, understanding what students are going through. But I also think it's important to remember that the faculty and staff are going through it as well. They're having to adjust. They're having to learn new systems, new formats of teaching, a digital format that maybe they never envisioned themselves using or having to figure out maybe this far into their career. So I think it is important. I think I have this pipe dream as far as faculty and staff and what they can do. I've had this idea in mind of just doing a day away. And whether that be for faculty and staff and for students, we're really encouraging their students and their classes to get away from your computer. You know, today we're understanding that you are going to be away from your computer. You are going to take space. You are possibly going to engage with others socially or virtually. You're going to take time for yourself because we know that it's only going to benefit you and how you function and the productivity that you have in class and work. So that's kind of my ideal world of how things maybe could be adapted or made to really encourage individuals to take time away and succeed. But what faculty and staff are willing to do is a different story.
I guess we can open it up for some questions if anybody in the audience has for our panelists. Guess maybe that might be it. Doesn't look like anybody's asking any more questions.
If there's no questions, we do have a brief PowerPoint for some of the resources that our panelists have sent. Oh wait, hang on, it looks like we do have a question. I'll get back to that in a sec here.
So it looks like Susan is asking, will we have access to this presentation later? Okay.
I can address that. We are recording this. We will post it on our YouTube channel. So as soon as that's uploaded, we can send out the link to that, as well as the resources.
And then, yeah, it looks like Rebecca's also asking, can resources be shared out in an email?
Yeah, so again, both will be shared out.
Okay.
Thank you for asking.
And yeah, what I was saying about like that PowerPoint, it's essentially all the resources that the panelists have given me, which I was going to share briefly, and then we'll get that sent out to everyone who participated in this meeting or this panel discussion. So I'm going to attempt to, there we go. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So Raymond and Amanda here, if you want to briefly discuss, some of the stuff that is provided, or any of the panelists even, because I know Gail sent this to me as well, and I also added the things that Richard and Mary sent to me recently. So if you want to go ahead and talk, go on ahead.
Yeah, so on campus, we do have the MSU Denver Counseling Center, and there are the phone numbers that you can call. And we also have the Health Center in our area, the SU Denver Counseling Center, CCD Counseling Center, the Phoenix Center at our area, and the 24/7 Victims Assistance and Crisis Line.
Looks like off-campus Colorado Crisis Center, National Alliance on Mental Illness, Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, and the primary care provider or mental health professional.
Then we also have the website, which is the Colorado Crisis Services, and From the Auraria Health Center, we have the MSU Denver Student Mental Health Resources PDF that will be sent out via email.
And if any of the panelists wanted to add on to any of the resources we shared, or I know you all pretty much talked about all this, but I just want to let you know we'll be sending these out, I think, via email to everyone who participated today.
Mary, actually, do you mind sharing a little bit about the toolkit for folks?
The toolkit. So the toolkit has links to any kind of digital material, as well as you can upload the logo if you're doing internal newsletters. And also, I think in the past, if the health centers want posters or cards, I'm happy to send those out. So if any of you look at them and feel like you want to take I'm happy to mail you. We're not in the office yet, but I go in maybe twice a month to send out materials. So if the health center wants posters for the treatment rooms or the waiting room, as well as cards, we have all that stuff. And that toolkit link also takes you to the youth campaign, which is below the surface, which again looks really different than the regular CCS campaign. The messaging all got updated last year. So there's some really good messaging that you can take a peek at. So that's just what is in the toolkit.
Awesome, thank you, Mary.
Sure.
All right. And then since we do have a few minutes left, we could take, or Raymond and Amanda could take any questions or any last minute comments from the panelists. We have a few minutes.
I just want to underscore, never worry alone. Sometimes one may feel like they're the only one dealing with an issue. And it's only in talking with somebody else that that other person may say, oh my gosh, you too? I have this experience too. And then they share. And that's how people start connections on, you know, common areas of interest or worry or stress or what have you. So I want to encourage that as well. And that mental health is no respect of persons. You can find mental health issues in every single background, walk of life, socioeconomic status, racial, ethnic group, what have you. We have had a fair amount of celebrities who have been open within recent years about their mental health and their struggles. We've also had Prince Harry, I believe, who has been an advocate as well, all across the pond, as we say. And I think it's important that, you know, to listen to their stories too. Everybody has a different story. The pain might be similar. It wouldn't be the exact same, but it's a similar pain. It's a similar struggle or trauma. And no one's pain should be considered less than or not worthy of. We are welcome and open to anybody and everybody, regardless of what you're struggling with. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Gail. Any other last minute questions or comments from our panelists? We appreciate the three of you taking time out of your days to be with us. This has all been great information. I've been getting emails and comments about making sure to get those resources. So I do think that this was very timely and helpful for everybody who attended. So again, thank you so much. We will hang out here for the next 15 minutes if there's any last minute questions. But I do want to re-emphasize our appreciation to all of you who attended. Students, again, please sign in. This is a double point or double ticket event for our giveaway at the end of the semester, as well as anybody who would like the email with the link in the resources. Please do fill out the sign-in form so that we can make sure to email those out to you. Thank you all. We appreciate it.
Thank you all. Take
Thank
care.
you.
Bye-bye. Yeah.
Thank you all.
If anybody would like to ask questions, we're still open for that. We're happy to provide you with any input or feedback that you might need or want.